How's it going, everyone? Another great episode of the New Scoop Podcast coming your way. I hope you're ready and glad to listen because we got a good one today. Going to be the first betting episode of the year, first gambling episode of the year. So if you want to make some money or not, either way, we're going to have some great sports talk. We're going to be looking at a Blazin 6, something I've been doing for the past 3 years, a six-leg week-to-week parlay for college football games. Just fun to talk about. We're going to get a week 1 college football preview, some previews for some schedules within the SEC and the Big 12. We got some upset alerts coming. Then on the NFL side, we're going to break down some preseason action. And then, we're going to get to some intriguing futures for the NFL and the college football. Some big what ifs coming in the 2024 football season. An MLB dive in, and then I have a special segment to plan off to round out the day. So it's going to be a great show for everyone today. Thank you for listening, and we're going to get right into it. How is Mizzou going to fare in their upcoming SEC season for 2024? Last year, the only 2 losses on the year, losing to LSU and Georgia, but their final game of the season did cap off a Cotton Bowl win versus Ohio State. They're ranked 11 in the preseason odds, and we're going to break down their schedule in just a little bit. They have starting quarterback Brady Cook, who's a dark horse right now for the Heisman Award winner. He had 3,317 yards, 21 touchdowns, 6 interceptions last year with a QBR of 77.6, which was good for 18th in the country. Now, the real weapons are in the receiving room, especially with Luther Burden III. This guy's unbelievable. He's a favorite for the Blitikoff right now. 86 receptions, 1,212 yards last year with 9 touchdowns and a 14.5 average. Basically, every single play this guy got out, he's that kind of an electric receiver. He's going to be a first-round draft pick coming up in this next NFL draft. And Mizzou's a team you have to watch out for in the SEC because even though I hate them, they could definitely make you pay for it because the way they look so far, the way they've looked in practices, they do really look like an elite level team. Now, if we break down their schedule, ranked at 11 right now, but let's look at the schedule they got. Murray State week 1. That should be an easy blowout. They'll be favored by probably around 40 or 50 points, something like that. And they'll probably, right now it says 47.5 on FanDuel. I go ahead and take the spread on that because I bet they'll win by 50 points or so. They'll put it on versus Murray State. And then week 2, the out-of-conference looking easy as hell here. Week 2, you got Buffalo. Buffalo at home, that should be a pretty easy blowout. You'll beat them by over 30. The MAC team won the MAC a couple years ago, but they're not at the same level that they once were with Lance Leipold at the helm. Boston College, revamped coaching staff this year. Unfortunately, they are losing some receiving talent, but, Boston College was a team last year. They played a game in Fenway Park. They had a pretty all right season, made a bowl game. They've been a team in recent years that can sneak their way into a top 25 and be a pretty sneaky team in the ACC. But this year, playing Mizzou, they shouldn't be a challenge for Mizzou. Now, Vanderbilt is their first SEC opponent, and it helps when you start off with the bottom of the SEC for your first game. Vanderbilt has been historically the bad team. They've been the team that SEC teams go and beat up on when they need an easy conference win. So that'll be no problem for them. Next, we have our first ranked matchup, number 11 Missouri versus number 20 Texas A&M. This is a game, in my mind, a coin flip. It could go either way. Now, it's a tough one to call right now. It's at Texas A&M, home of the 12th man, really strong home field advantage. So currently, I would give it to the Aggies, especially because I'm really high on them. Everybody knows the portal production they've had, the fact that they've been able to land all these number 1 classes. It says something about the way they're able to get it done. And this new coaching regime, it has a level of prestige to it that we haven't seen at Texas A&M in some time. They're prepared to do what this recruiting class is, what they were supposed to do already. Instead of 7-5, instead of 8-4 this year, they're looking to make the college football playoff. And so I think a statement win versus Missouri to make them 4-1 makes a lot of sense here. Then you go back to the easy peasy out of conference games at UMass in Massachusetts. That'll be an easy blowout. UMass, an independent team, one of the worst teams in power football right now, in FBS football. And then October 19th, you have to play the Auburn Tigers. A difficult one, Tigers versus Tigers. It's home in Columbia, Missouri, and you're fighting against a team that was a drive away, not even a drive away, a play away, a Hail Mary away from beating Alabama in the Iron Bowl last season. Finishes 7-5, and Auburn's going to keep improving. You give me this game in 2 years, I'll take Auburn. But right now, I don't think Auburn's at the Missouri level, so I'll go ahead and take Missouri to pull out the win here. Then you got your toughest opponent of the whole season. I mean, Missouri does deal with one of the easier SEC schedules. They don't have a schedule like Georgia or like Florida, who are two of the hardest schedules in all of FBS. Instead, it's a pretty easier schedule. You only have 3 ranked opponents that you have to go deal with in Missouri and Texas A&M, Alabama, and Oklahoma. And Oklahoma's even new to the conference. But your toughest game does come versus Alabama, a team I think could have a great chance at winning the Southeastern Conference this season. And so since you have to deal with Alabama at home and their fans are loud, Dixieland Delight's playing, everyone's got a couple beers in them in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and that atmosphere is going to be untouched. So, unfortunately for the Missouri Tigers, Alabama's too much for them. Kalen DeBoer and the Crimson Tide going to take him down. Jalen Milroe beats Brady Cook, and Alabama continues their undefeated season. Next, you get a pretty heated rivalry between the Missouri Tigers and the Oklahoma Sooners. This game's in Columbia this year. This rivalry isn't hyped up as much as it should be. These fan bases do not like each other. It is very heated, and this game, honestly, another 50-50 for me. Oklahoma does have to deal with a difficult SEC schedule this year, and that's the reason they're more likely to go around 7-5 rather than being a kind of team that goes and blows teams out of the water, makes a college football playoff. Instead, they're probably going to have a more lackluster year, but that's just because of the difficulty of the schedule that they have. If they were dealing with Missouri's schedule, I think it'd be more easy to go 10-2 or 9-3. Now, Oklahoma did have some losses last year against Oklahoma State in that rivalry game versus Kansas and against Arizona in their bowl game. 3 Big 12 opponents for this year. And how will they fare versus the Mizzou Tigers? I think it'll be a toss-up towards the fourth quarter. But honestly, I've been going back and forth on this game. But at home, I'm gonna take Mizzou. It's really difficult, and I thought about taking the upset for a long time, but I'm gonna give it to Mizzou. I'm gonna say they cap that one off. It's hard for me to say that, but they're gonna beat Oklahoma. I think they'll go and they'll beat South Carolina at home. On the road at South Carolina. South Carolina's at home. Then you have Mississippi State and Arkansas to round off your SEC schedule. And we know those are 2 schools that aren't the strongest of opponents, so they should beat both of those teams. And 10-2, unfortunately, in the Southeastern Conference, will probably not be enough to get you into a championship game. But a 10-2 SEC team is very, very liable for the playoffs. 100%. They'll be watching the playoff committee and seeing how it judges the strength of schedule and how SEC play works. And we don't know any of this yet because it's the first year under the 12 team. But when we know more info about that, and when it comes to vote, it'll be exciting to see if Mizzou makes it or not. How much can Graham Mertz improve this season to elevate Florida from where they were last year? The Florida acquisitions and talent are top 20 level. It's true. But the problem with it is they're dealing with very tough schedules. They have the toughest schedule in the SEC this year. So you got a top 25 level team, but the schedule isn't there. Now, that on the same side, if they went 9-3 this season, I could genuinely see the scheduling committee being like, well, we could put them in the playoff because they're good enough to be in the playoff. They just had to deal with the toughest conference in America and all of the hardest teams in that conference. They ended up playing one way or another. Billy Napier, I like him as a head coach. His seat's getting hotter day by day. Now, I think he should be the head coach here for years to come, because if he continues to get this talent here and they're a top 20 level team, Florida can maybe not be back to where they were under Urban Meyer in the early 2000s when they had Tim Tebow, but they can get back to a consistent level. We're searching for a playoff spot team, especially in the 12-team era. Now, Graham Mertz, the kid out of Blue Valley, he has from Overland Park, Kansas, 4-star recruit. He had 2,903 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 3 interceptions with the 69.3 quarterback rating, good for 36th in the country last season at Florida. And formerly from Wisconsin, comes over, transfers to Florida. He's their starting quarterback. Can he this year elevate his play to a level where he's consistently getting a talented receiving room the ball? Now, they did lose a lot on the ground game. They lost a lot of their running backs. They've dealt with injuries in the running back room, and they had their number one transfer out on them. That does not help. And so a lot of the ground game production will have to be replaced. What can Florida do to replace the carries of their running back, Trevor Etienne? He's hopped the road. He's down the road. He's over at Georgia. He goes to your rival, the other side of the cocktail bowl. And for you, that's unfortunate, especially losing out to Eddie Battle and Carlson Joseph. Their eligibility is expiring. They're moving on in the transfer portal. Whatever way it is, you're losing 3 key running back guys this season. But who do you have? Well, you're welcoming back Montrell Johnson Jr., Trayon Webb, and Jacoby Jackson, and you got some new guys. You got a freshman, Jaden Baugh, KD Daniels, 2 guys coming in. You don't have a guy that's going to replace the talent Trevor Etienne had, but you have a lot of guys that can piece it together, and if you get carries to those guys, they're going to give you yards. So you want to be able to create consistency. You want 4 or 5 guys that you can rotate in and out. You can use them as receiving threats, running threats. And if you get that from it and you get Graham Mertz improving, well, let's take a look at their schedule and let's see what they can do as a football team this year. So in in their out of conference games, they're dealing with Samford, who's not a problem for them. That'll be an easy peasy win for them. And UCF's a sneaky team this year. And that's what's tough about this schedule. Even their out of conference games, they can't get a break. They have Miami and UCF. UCF's a dark horse Big 12 team, a team that claims a national championship from just a couple years down the road, have beaten good Auburn teams and teams like that. Lots of good Power 5 teams when all they were was a group of 5. They're a really solid team, and so is Miami. Miami definitely has a chance at beating them. They're the 19th ranked team in the country right now. Florida's not even a ranked team according to the AP poll. So when you look at it, you see maybe I would say 1 loss. You got a coin flip game in the out of conference with Miami. Most people will have that taken as a loss. Miami is currently favored over Florida, but I actually expect an upset. That's my prediction for this game, is that we'll see an upset, and Florida's going to take that. Now, when you go to the in conference, it doesn't get any easier for them. When you look at top 10 opponents, they got Ole Miss, Texas. They have Texas A&M, who's just outside the top 10 at number 20. They have Tennessee, also just outside at 15. Georgia at number 1. LSU is at 13. You also have And another out-of-conference game, I forgot to mention Florida State, the number 10 ranked team. So your out-of-conference games, you have the 19th ranked Miami Hurricanes. You have the 10th ranked Florida State Seminoles. You have an unranked but very good UCF football team. And then Samford. Samford is the only game all season that is like a give me win. Like no chance they'll win. Every other team has a chance at beating Florida. I'm not saying that'll happen, but it's definitely possible. Okay, so let's look at some individual games that they'll probably win, some coin flips, So Samford, we've already established, is a win. Some coin flips. Miami is definitely a coin flip. Tennessee, not a coin flip, but I could see that going either way, really. Kentucky, I would say, is a coin flip. LSU. Though I'm not as high on LSU as a lot of other people are. So those are my coin flips this season for Florida. Now, when you look at games you won't win, Georgia, you're not winning against Georgia. Georgia's just too solid of a team this year. Florida State's a difficult game for you. It is a rivalry game, and anything can happen in those. But do you really expect to beat Florida State? I know they don't. Ole Miss is another team that's a top 6 team that's going to the college football playoff most likely. Texas, one of the clear top 4 teams in my mind. They play 2 of them. They play Georgia and Texas. Texas A&M's a coin flip game. Not a coin flip game necessarily, but Texas A&M will be favored in that game. I am high on Texas A&M. I'm also high on Florida, but I don't see them getting past Texas A&M. So you have a very, very difficult schedule. So we'll give you the benefit of the doubt. We'll say you beat Miami and Samford. You probably start 4-1 because of those out-of-conference games and dealing with easy SEC opponent Mississippi State. Only loss coming to Texas A&M in that part of the season. Then you get your difficult stretch of football. Tennessee, Kentucky, Georgia, Texas, LSU. Really, when I look at the schedule right now, I see 6 wins. That Florida team is talented enough to be a top 25 opponent, but they're a 6-win football team for this season, partly because of the ground production, partly because of the defense, but in the end of the day, they'll contend in a lot of those games, but they'll have 4 or so 1-point losses, 1-possession losses this year. It'll be difficult for them. They won't get blown out, but they'll lose a lot of games. But we'll see how it improves in the next season. Kansas State is only 1 year removed from winning the Big 12 championship game. So can they go grab another one of those trophies and grab the auto bid this season, or will they have a disappointing year to their standards? Well, right now they are the 18th ranked team in the conference, and here's what you need to know about their quarterback situation. Will Howard, he's been their starting quarterback for the last couple of years. He's out. He goes and transfers to Ohio State. But not to worry. They have this guy named Avery Johnson. He was a 4-star, just like Graham Mertz. He is coming out of Kansas, and they're really hoping that he is the guy that's going to make this team a playoff team and hopefully bring home the first national championship in Kansas State team sports history. They're only one of 2 power programs to do that, along with Virginia Tech. And they are currently the 18th ranked team in the land. Now, Avery Johnson, he's had a couple. He's a really talented guy. The only problem is he has a lot of issues completing passes. His completion percentage is anywhere from 45 to 50%, but it's never really super high up there. He's a great runner. He's an athletic guy, but he needs to work on the accuracy. So far through practices, it looks like he's underthrowing balls. He hasn't been completely on target. He's missed some up-close targets, and they need to eliminate that if they're going to want to have this guy be exactly who they think he is, which is a Heisman dark horse contender. Now, if you take a glance at the schedule, they do have some difficult opponents this year. Unlike their rivals Kansas, they do get a lot of the better teams in the Big 12. They have to deal with Oklahoma State and Ollie Gordon. They have to deal with Arizona and Noah Fafita. They have to deal with Colorado. depending on how you feel about them, and Shedeur Sanders. They have to deal with Kansas, obviously, and Jalen Daniels. They have to deal with Iowa State, who's an underrated team in my mind. They have to deal with West Virginia. All difficult matchups here. So they're second in odds to win the Big 12 right now, but it's not a bet I would place. If you look at their out-of-conference games, UT Martin, Tulane, two games that really you could see them going either way because, well, UT Martin's they'll definitely beat UT Martin. There's no doubt about it. Now, if you look at Tulane, that's a team they have lost to in recent history. Tulane is one of the better Group of Five teams. They are looking to grab that Group of Five playoff bid this season, and they had a Cotton Bowl win not too long ago. I believe it was a Cotton Bowl versus USC just 2 years ago. This last coming year, they went 12-2 and lost in the conference championship game. They're a team that wins a lot of football games, Tulane, and they're going to have to go play the 18th ranked Kansas State Wildcats. I'll give the Kansas State Wildcats that win. They're going to be 2-0 out of conference this season. Now, in their ranked matchups in conference, you got Kansas, you got Oklahoma State, and you got Arizona. Here's how I think you'll fare. I think you'll lose to Kansas and Oklahoma. You're not going to beat Kansas a 15th straight time. I don't see that. How could you do that, especially with the talent that Kansas has right now? This is the most talented the program has been at least since 2007, maybe not of all time. Recruiting-wise, it's only getting better there. Lance Leipold has the schemes, and frankly, they were a bad call away from beating Kansas State last year, despite a third-string freshman quarterback being in. So if Jalen Daniels is able to stay healthy and he goes and plays that game versus Kansas State in Manhattan, Kansas, I do believe Kansas will come out on top. Now, the reason I have Oklahoma State beating out Kansas State in that game is just because of Ollie Gordon III. I believe he's going to run for over 200 yards on them. He is that much of a force, and the Kansas State D-line will have seen nothing like him throughout the first 4 weeks of the season. They're going to get to him and be absolutely perplexed. Now, a great Week 3 matchup, September 13th, you get Arizona versus Kansas State. And honestly, that's going to be a fight between two pretty good quarterbacks. You got Noah Fafita, you got Avery Johnson, and Arizona was a team last year. They weren't ranked to start out the year, and then over the year, they just got better and better and better each week. I picked them to beat Oklahoma in their bowl game, and you know what they do? They cap off the 10-3 season by beating Oklahoma in their bowl. This year, they do lose their head coach, Kalen DeBoer. He goes to Alabama, so Jedd Fisch decides to become the new coach for the Washington Huskies, leaving there a big hole in Arizona's head coaching room. So you know who they decided to go get? Brett Brennan. He's been the San Jose State Spartans head coach for the previous 7 years. He had 1 year in 2020 where they were 7-1. Their highest on the AP poll was ranked 19th, and they finished ranked 22nd. They did cap off an undefeated season by losing in the Arizona Bowl. But other than that, at San Jose State, it was kind of a rough journey for him. And the previous year, they did go 7-6, make a bowl game, but lost in the Hawaii Bowl. The previous year, they lost in the famous Idaho Potato Bowl. And other than those 2 years and in the COVID year, other than that, they didn't even make a bowl game. In his first season there, 2-11. 1-11, then 5-7, and he created a mid-level team, but he never really had any kind of consistent winning at San Jose State. So now he's coming to a more talented Arizona team, and we'll see what he can do here. He's a pretty talented head coach. He's been doing this thing for a long time, coaching-wise, and will he be able to take Arizona to a Big 12 level championship? I don't know. I think Kansas State goes and they grab this game to make them 4-0 to start 3-0 to start the year, but within ranked teams in their conference, they're going to be 1-3. Although Iowa State will be ranked by the time they go play them. Farmageddon last year, the Iowa State versus Kansas State rivalry. It was one of the best games of the football season. It was snowing on the field. Iowa State pulled the upset versus the ranked Kansas State team. Now, will they be able to do it 2 times in a row? They beat them 42-35 last year. Will Howard went for 288 yards. You had Becht going for 230 and 3 touchdowns. You had unreal receiving performances in that game. Iowa State receiver Abu Sama, he had 614 yards all season, or a running back, 614 yards all year. In this game alone, he had 16 carries, 276 yards, and 3 touchdowns on the ground. I had to cough because of how groundbreaking that performance was. Uh, Obviously, Kansas State tight end Ben Sinnott, he's been unreal. Now, he's on the Washington Commanders now, but he last year in this game had 10 receptions for 136 yards. Will it happen again? Will the Iowa State Cyclones be able to upset the Kansas State Wildcats once again? It's going to be a ranked matchup going into the final week of the season. It'll be a fight to the death, really. It's going to be a freezing cold environment. A late season games like this in the Midwest, always a fight, and it should be high scoring once again. We'll see who comes out on top. We'll give Kansas State the benefit of the doubt right now, but the way I think the Iowa State's season is looking to be, I don't know if they will be able to hold off Iowa State this year. Kansas State, they have a win total right now. I believe it is 8.5 on FanDuel right now. I believe the over under is 8.5. That could go either way the way you look at it. But I do think they'll have losses to Oklahoma State and Kansas this year. Maybe a loss to Iowa State too. But at the end of the year, it'll really be a 3-team race between Utah, Kansas, and Kansas State, maybe Oklahoma State, for who will be in the Big 12 championship. I do believe it to be Utah and Kansas right now. But we'll see what Kansas State can do and if they can maybe grab a spot in this 12-team playoff for the upcoming season. Sticking on the same path for a second, we're going to glance at Iowa State's schedule. We're going to look at them. We're going to review that season really quickly. So, North Dakota, week 1, the FCS team, I think they'll go ahead and grab that. You look at the Cyclones, and we have a team that isn't ranked right now, but they could be ranked very soon. I think after they beat Iowa, they'll be put on the map as a ranked football team. So the first 5 weeks of the season, they have nothing but one tough game versus Iowa, but then they get the 2 weak opponents in the conference with Houston and Baylor, North Dakota and Arizona State. Now, West Virginia is a much tougher opponent, and you're going to Morgantown. But I do believe you'll be able to take care of business there. West Virginia fans are growing increasingly cocky about their football team this year. They seem to think that they're untouchable in Big 12 play, and they'll just waltz right into the championship game. Well, I think there's going to be a little bit more bumps on the road than they may think there are this season. Just because you won the Duke's Mayo Bowl doesn't mean you're going to make the national championship. Let's remember that. UCF is also another very difficult game. That team in Orlando is an improved football team. Now they're coming to Iowa State. You don't come to Iowa State and expect to win, but it's going to be a fight. And I do think that Iowa State's going to grab that one. Then this tough stretch continues with Texas Tech and Kansas their next couple weeks. They'll win versus Texas Tech. It'll be a toss-up. Texas Tech's a running team, a passing team. They're an everything team. What am I saying? They're an everything team. But especially in recent years, we've seen a lot of the ground game ever since Patrick Mahomes has left the program and they had Baker Mayfield transfer out. But then versus Kansas, both of these teams, you could see both these teams being undefeated. They go to Lawrence. Well, I guess they don't go to Lawrence. I guess they go to Arrowhead. Playing in Arrowhead Stadium, the bright lights of an NFL stadium, and what's going to happen there? I think Kansas wins that game, but could be a college game day game between two undefeated teams right there. Last 2 weeks, skipping over Cincinnati because that's an easy win. But the last 2 weeks of the season, you go play Utah at Utah and Kansas State. Well, you gotta end on these last 4 weeks of the season having played Kansas, Utah, and Kansas State. That is difficult. You're not beating Utah. They're the 12th ranked team in the land right now. And then Kansas State, we just talked about that game in like a 3-hour breakdown. So the unfortunately for Iowa State, they do have a last couple difficult weeks of the season, but they could be a 9-4 team this year if they win their bowl game, and I think they'll sneak into that top 25. Genuinely, Iowa State could definitely win the Big 12 this season. The Cyclones, it's a toss up because they're in the Big 12. Anything can happen in the Big 12. If you told me Houston won the Big 12 next year, yeah, I'd be a little surprised, but really you can make a case for almost all of these teams. You can make a case for UCF, Texas Tech, Kansas, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, you name it. It's the Big 12. All right, let's get into something I've been doing for around 3 years now. I call it the Blazin 6. It's going to be a once weekly thing. We're going to do this thing every single week of the college football season. Since we're a week away from week 0, we're starting with the first Blazin 6 of the year. It's a 6-leg parlay. Normally, it's just results. But, today, since we don't have a ton of matchups in week 0, we did have to do some other things that weren't just results. And there are no lines for FCS games out right now. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to use any of those either. But let's get straight into it. The first game we got right now is Florida State, 11.5-point favorites over Georgia Tech. I'm taking the 11.5. Now, Florida State is coming off of a season where they went undefeated in the regular season and were snubbed from the playoffs. It created a lot of controversy within the playoff committee, and the fans were obviously pissed off for a reason or another. I still believe that Alabama was the more deserving team, and they were the better football team. Their only loss coming to Texas in the regular season, but it did mark the first time that a undefeated team that won their conference championship game in a Power 5 conference was snubbed from the playoffs, as we had even seen group of 5 teams make the playoffs before this happened. So Florida State fans were very angry about that. Georgia Tech's coming off of a season where they looked to improve. They were 6-6 last season, and they have built a roster very well. They aren't the powerhouse that they used to be in the 90s. Obviously, they had that one national, I don't know about a powerhouse, but they did have that one national championship. But they're looking to maybe upset Georgia Tech. They kept it close for the first half against Georgia last season, which is a team that Florida State obviously lost to in the Orange Bowl last year. But now, with Florida State in week 0, this game is in Ireland. We'll see. Florida State, Jordan Travis is no longer the quarterback there anymore. We'll see how DJ can perform in his first game as a Seminole, but the 11.5 does seem like an easy bet here, so I'll take the 11.5 over Georgia Tech. Next bet, we have New Mexico. We're taking plus 9.5 over Montana State. Montana State was an 8-4 FCS team last year. They had losses to all of their losses came to very good FCS teams, so nothing wrong with that. And all of them except for one was close. They got blown out by Montana, but other than that, they barely lost to North Dakota State, FCS powerhouse, barely losing to South Dakota State along with that. And their only other loss, what team was that? I can't remember what FCS team it was, but it was another FCS powerhouse from last year that ended up going to the FCS playoffs. So they're one of those teams that is going to be an FCS playoff team, and they're playing a very bad New Mexico team. But I do not expect an FCS team to go out and beat an FBS team by more than 10 points. Yeah, I do think Montana State's going to grab that game, but not by 10 points. So I'll take the 9.5 there. Then we got SMU minus 27.5 over Nevada. I'm taking the 27.5. SMU's a team that won their conference championship game last year. It was an 11-win season for them, a very good year. Of course, they're moving to the ACC this year. And now with the move to the ACC, they're going to look to maybe get into the college football playoff, maybe do exactly what they did in their conference last year in this brand new conference. Now, Nevada is a terrible Mountain West opponent that they're playing. They had bad games through every team they played pretty much last year, only winning 2 games. Somehow they kept it close versus the Kansas Jayhawks in week 3. That game had me frustrated many times. But I am going to take the 27.5 over Nevada because New Mexico or SMU should not struggle at any point with Nevada this week. Delaware State, I took the plus 38.5 over Hawaii. Hawaii's already a bad football team. Now, Delaware State is the worst football team. Like, you cannot get worse than Delaware State. They are an FCS team that lost every single one of their games last year, and they lost to awful opponents. Every group of 5 team they played, they lost to by around 50 points or more. I remember when they played Penn State a couple years ago, and it looked like there was blood on the field. It looked I don't know. There might be Texas football teams in high school that would beat this Delaware State team. I could see that happening, but I went ahead and took the 38.5 because Hawaii is a bad enough football team to where they're not beating anyone by 40 points this season. So I took the 38.5, but I went back and forth in that one for like a couple hours. SMU and Nevada, we already talked about that game. I went ahead and took the over on points there, 57.5. Nevada isn't good at many things, but there are going to be points on the board this game. They'll probably put up 10 or 13, 14 of their own. And SMU, if they're gonna cover that spread, which I have them covering of 28 points or so, then they're gonna have a lot of scoring in this game. So I took over the 57.5 points. I expect that to happen. New Mexico State and Montana State, I took the under on the points there with 53.5 points. I don't expect this to be a super high scoring game. Montana State, I could see like a 17-10 win. No crazy offense here, especially when you're dealing with power or FCS versus FBS matchups. It's not going to be too high scoring unless it's an unbelievably good FBS team playing a terrible FCS team. That's not what we're seeing here. It's kind of the other way around. It's a great FCS team playing a bad FBS team. So it'll keep a low scoring game, and I don't think it'll reach the mark of 53.5 points. So that's good. The first Blazin 6 of the year. We'll see a lot more of these as we move along. We'll give you the record week by week, along with the pick'em record. We're not going to go every single pick of the pick'em the weekly, but I will give you the record at the end of the week and some of the marquee matchups each week. The New York Yankees go out and they drop another series, losing this time to the Detroit Tigers. This was a really unfortunate game for them. They had a 1-0 lead going into the bottom of the 9th inning. They get a guy on second. They're 1 out away from winning the ball game, though. They got 2 outs already, and you know what? There's a single. The Tigers score. They tied the game up, and the Yankees score to make it 2-1 in the top of the 10th inning. But the Tigers get both of the runs back and go on to win the game 3-2 in the heartbreak of New York Yankees fans. The Yankees now have continued their struggling as it finally seemed like they were back. Now all of a sudden they're fighting with the Orioles for the division. And they have 73 wins, so it should be a playoff year for them, obviously. There's still 21 games over 500, nothing to worry about. But in the back of your mind, you're really thinking that's a pennant-level team. They can't even win a series over the 4th place in the AL Central Detroit Tigers, the 3 games below 500 Detroit Tigers. Yeah, I don't see that happening this year for them. The red-hot San Diego Padres, they lose their final game of the series to the Colorado Rockies 3-2. The San Diego scores a run in the top of the 8th inning, but by then all the damage has been done as the bottom of the barrel Rockies take home a win against the San Diego Padres. Padres really need to get some winning going. Obviously, that NL wild card is just absolutely massive right now. And there is a great three-team race to watch between the Dodgers, the Padres, and the Arizona Diamondbacks right now going on in the NL West. That is a very awesome fight that we've been seeing. Kansas City Royals complete the series sweep over the Cincinnati Reds, winning their fourth straight game, winning 8-1 today. 13-1 yesterday. Dyron Blanco stars in both of those games. He doesn't start a lot of baseball games for the Royals. He's been a ninth hitter. He hasn't done anything crazy this year. He comes in and when he needs to in pinch running opportunities and he runs. He's the runner. He's like Gerard Dyson in the 2015 season. But we gave him a couple starts in this series, 2 starts back to back, and he made every single moment of it. He gets a single in the first game. He goes for a home run in the early innings. He hits a grand slam in his second at bat and then gets a single. So a 3-hit game for him. And then today he had, I think, another single and he had another home run. So 3 home runs in 2 games from not a power hitter in Dyron Blanco. He's a big runner though. And so maybe the Royals consider adding him to the starting lineup based on these 2 performances. I don't know. I'm sure they'll probably start him more because he's obviously a speed threat. He's pretty good with the bat, as we've seen. And the Kansas City Royals pick up a crucial win. They have a series versus the Angels coming up. They are currently 3 games back of the division lead. The Guardians are slowly losing more games. They're in 3rd place. The Twins are 2 games back. It's a big division fight there. The Arizona Diamondbacks in that NL West race currently lose 8-7 to the Rays in a great game that goes all the way to 12 innings. It starts with Tampa Bay scoring 2 in the first inning, then scoring 3 in the 5th, then 1 in the 6th. They're up 6-0 by the 7. It looks to be over. And then guess what? All of a sudden, looks like they might blow it. Arizona gets 1 in the 7th, 2 in the 8th, and 3 in the top of the 9th inning to tie the baseball game. We go to the 10th inning. Arizona strikes. They get a run in the top of the first. Uh-oh. Now all of a sudden it looks like you're going to blow a 6-0 lead. Well, guess what? Tampa Bay gets a run, and then they get the run in the bottom of the 12th inning that they needed to win the ball game. So as it looked, they were going to choke the game, and they ended up not. They ended up saving themselves from looking absolutely dumb as they're now 1 game over 500. They needed a big win there. They're fighting for a wild card, but currently they're under teams like the Red Sox and the Kansas City Royals and the Seattle Mariners. The Diamondbacks, although, they're fighting for that divisional spot. The Mariners get a game closer. They win 10-3 over the Pittsburgh Pirates, who have been struggling. The Pirates do this thing where they're good for the first couple months and then they forget how to play baseball. And the Mariners, they had the lead for the AL West most of the year. It looked like they were going to run away from it. And then all of a sudden, here come the Houston Astros. They look to seem inevitable, and that's exactly what they are. They're leading that division, and it doesn't look like there's going to be any turning back. Let's take our weekly look at the standings. Right now, the Baltimore Orioles and the New York Yankees are still dead tied for the Eastern Division in the American League at 63 and 52 apiece. They're fighting. It's one of the best races in baseball watching these 2 teams play right now. They're both 5-5 in their last 10 games. The Yankees have lost a pair in a row. Baltimore's won a game. And if you look at the American League Central, you got the Twins. They're only 2 games out of the Guardians. The Royals are only 3 games out of the Guardians. So as a Royals fan, it's the most frustrating sitting in 3rd place right now when genuinely you're right behind both of the teams that you're right there with. Guardians are on a 3-game losing streak, 5-5 in their last 10. Minnesota's on a 1-game losing streak. Kansas City's won their last 4 games after having a frustrating series where they could have grabbed the lead over the Minnesota Twins. Boston Red Sox are now officially 3.5 games out of the wild card spot. They've lost 1 game in a row. And the Royals aren't super threatened right now. The next closest behind them is the Seattle Mariners, sitting at 5.5. So it's going to take a push from one of these three teams, Boston, Seattle, or Tampa, most likely, to get the Kansas City out of a playoff spot and to get themselves in before the playoffs come up here soon. But then we'll move to the NL side of things really quickly. If you look at it, the leaders are still set what they have been all year: Philly, Los Angeles Dodgers, and the Milwaukee Brewers. But no longer can we say that the Los Angeles Dodgers are a lock for the West. We could genuinely see San Diego or Arizona grab one pretty soon, because the way they've been looking compared to the way the Dodgers looked, yes, the Dodgers are 7-3 in their last 10, but they have slowed down for sure over the past couple weeks. Arizona, meanwhile, they were being around a 500 team. It looked like both them and the Rangers were going to have disappointing years after making the World Series. Now it looks like Arizona is actually going to have a better year record-wise than they had last year, and they could definitely be in a spot to make it back to the Fall Classic. San Diego, now they have had breakout stars. Jackson Morel's been a great player for them, as he's a Rookie of the Year candidate. So having him is a big piece of why they're leading the top of the NL wild card currently. He's got a 290 average, 17 homers, 66 RBIs, and 123 hits this year. It's really a fight between him and Paul Skeens over who's going to win the NL Rookie of the Year, and the fight for the NL wild card stands. It's a great fight. It'll be fun to see as it moves along. We cover it every week, and it's no different this week. What are some intriguing future bets that we can look at and maybe decide to make for the upcoming college football and NFL seasons? Well, the first one I would like to look at is most regular season passing yards for the 2024 season in the NFL. The reason I like this one so much is because while I do think Patrick Mahomes probably does have the most likely chance to do this right now, Tua Tagovailoa did lead the NFL in passing yards last year with 4,600 yards, and right now is plus 1,100. He has receivers like Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, yet he is only sixth in odds, and if you bet $10 right now, you win 110 with Tua Tagovailoa. Jordan Love is another good bet I could see happening. He's a guy that really emerged in the second half of last season, and he's plus 1,900 odds right now. And the last guy on here are a couple other guys, really, Brock Purdy and Caleb Williams. Caleb Williams is the rookie guy, but after seeing what he can do in these preseason games alone, the incompletions he has made is incredible. Honestly, it looks a little Mahomey the way he eludes in the pocket, the way he can escape. The same stuff we saw at USC when he was completing 500 yards a game to Jordan Addison in his Heisman year, when he was escaping like that. He was getting tripped up left and right, almost sacked, almost broken down by an O-line, and was still able to get the ball out. Right now, it's bet $10, win 290 with Caleb Williams, and that's a bet I would consider placing. All right, on to division winners. I always like division winners for overs. A lot of these division winners are negative money, but don't let that get you. Don't let that make you afraid. I mean, just because you don't want to take as many risks on bets, especially if you know it's surefire. If you know the team's going to win the division, like I'm pretty sure the San Francisco 49ers are going to run away with the NFC West this year. So you got the San Francisco 49ers minus 190 to win the NFC West this year. I had the Green Bay Packers plus 200 to win the NFC North this year. Atlanta Falcons minus 145. That's one you could easily sway me on. Baker Mayfield and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they've won the division past couple years with Tom Brady, now with Baker Mayfield. They had a pretty solid playoff run too last year where they almost upset the Lions in the divisional round. So there's a chance that you could sway me on a bet there, because I don't like Atlanta being negative money in a division that always seems to be a little bit of a toss up. Now, I do like Philly at negative money. Minus 140 with Philly does not bother me just because Philadelphia is that team. They're very good this year and they fixed a lot of the flaws that they had in the previous year. Also, there has not been a repeat championship in the NFC East since '04. So, the Cowboys probably, according to that, won't win it again. Now, the one I'm going to take the most negative money on, bet $10, win $2.30, is the Kansas City Chiefs minus 230. Because the Kansas City Chiefs have won the AFC West, I forget how many years in a row now, but it doesn't look like anything's stopping them. I did take the Cincinnati Bengals. They're second in odds to win the AFC North. I took them plus the 165 just because that is so close. I have the Houston Texans listed to win the AFC South here. They have CJ Stroud, won the Offensive Rookie of the Year previous season, and he is looking to improve on that year, have an MVP-like year, got new receivers like Stephon Diggs, but you could easily convince me that Indianapolis at 3 could win. They have plus 310 odds right now, and I would 100% think about taking that. New York Jets plus 170. I don't like Buffalo this year. I've made that clear 100 million times. Dolphins intrigue me, but I do like New York if Aaron Rodgers stays healthy this year. I'm going to go ahead and replace the Houston Texans with the Indianapolis Colts, and that 10 I parlayed all of those division winners together, and a $10 bet there would get you $5,572 right there. So that's just for the division winners if I parlayed all my winners together. Also, a real quick public service announcement. That was just I was just looking at what it would be. Don't actually place an 8-leg parlay for futures with all of your division winners. That wouldn't be the smartest thing ever. I mean, if you're going to put pizza money on that, then maybe just for fun. But don't actually go out and do something crazy and lose all your money. Only bet the money you have. That was just purely to see what it would look like just based off of what it is. Now, if we move on to conference championship winners for the upcoming year, I've gone out it many times. I've said the Green Bay Packers are definitely a team I could see coming out of the NFC with Jordan Love in him. And then Kansas City, their ceiling the last 6 seasons has been the AFC Championship game, and they've made the Super Bowl 4 times in those years. So I expect them to go back again. The FanDuel does too, because they're only plus 350 right now. That parlay right now, $10 would get you $395 just for the AFC Championship and NFC Championship winners. And then if we move on to a Super Bowl, let's find a prop for that. Super Bowl. The Kansas City Chiefs plus 600, $10 to win $60. That's the three-peat. I believe it happens this year. So with this 12-team era of college football, it's really exciting because now you can place bets on whether you think teams are going to be in the college football playoff or whether they're going to be out of it. So right now, if you look at the odds, you see Nebraska sitting at 1,000. That's intriguing because we've already looked at their schedule. We've already broken that down. And we've determined if Dylan Raiola can come in there and improve that offense in the ways I think he can, that they could be a sneaky playoff team. And right now, plus 1,000 for that just to get into the playoff. They don't have to do anything in it. They could go 10-2 and sneak into the playoff right there. There's your money. Iowa State plus 850 is intriguing. I like Kansas plus 700. Oklahoma State plus 700. I'm sorry. Liberty plus 440. The reason I'm saying Liberty, and that's a good one, because they're a group of 5 team that doesn't play any Power 4 opponents. One group of 5 team is auto bid into these playoffs, so one of those teams has to get in. Tennessee plus money right now, plus 195. Utah plus 190, favored in the Big 12 currently. Plus 180 for Mizzou. plus 160 for Florida State, and plus 100 for Alabama are the most intriguing bets to me currently because those are all plus money for teams that all look pretty good to make it. I wouldn't bet on an Ohio State or a Georgia. They're too minus money for me. Minus 650, minus 600. Oregon's minus 330. Texas is minus 220. But those bets, they're all plus money. Those are all teams that could very well make the playoff. Most people think Florida State's going to get in their plus money. Most people think Alabama's going to get in their plus money. There's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 teams that are minus money currently, and 12 teams are guaranteed to make it. So any way you look at it, one of these teams that's plus money is going to hit. And I even think some of these teams that are minus money, such as Penn State, such as Notre Dame, are less likely to make the playoff than a team like Alabama or a team like Florida State, a team like Utah, Tennessee, Kansas. One of those guys seems more likely in my mind to get in the playoff instead of those teams. So I am really intrigued by how much plus money there is to offer with it. So I went ahead and I parlayed all of my conference championship winners just for fun. The ones we went over the other day on a couple weeks ago on that podcast. You had Florida State in the ACC plus 290, Memphis plus 230 in the American Athletic Conference, Oregon plus 220 in the Big Ten, Kansas plus 1,000 in the Big 12, Liberty minus 195, Alabama plus 700, Miami of Ohio plus 240 in the MAC, Boise State in the Mountain West minus 125, and Appalachian State plus 270 in the Sun Belt Conference. I threw that in a 9-leg parlay just for funsies to see what it would give me. Pizza change, you're looking at $8 for over about $1 million. About 993 is what we're looking at right there. Almost about $1 million. Obviously, nobody's placing that, but that's just for a little fun. If we were to, we're going to preview week 1 of the college football season next week. We're going to look at a lot more games then. But right now, I just want to look at some of these maybe potential upsets by big teams in week 1. First of all, I want to start with Deion Sanders, Colorado, playing North Dakota State at home at Colorado. Now, this is an intriguing matchup because Colorado is 9-point favorites right now, but I would go ahead and take the North Dakota State straight up. Yes, I expect them to win that game. They're the Alabama of the football championship, conference championship division, whatever you want to call it, the FCS. They have had 2 quarterbacks drafted in the fountain for an FCS program that is absolutely unheard of. So I expect them to go shut down in week 1, Deion Sanders in Colorado, and leave those fans in Boulder, Colorado in shock. So I'll take not only plus the 9, but I'll take straight money line on North Dakota State because I expect them to grab an upset week 1. Another FCS versus FBS matchup in the first week of the season. Oklahoma State. I'm not predicting them to win, but South Dakota State is very intriguing in that game. They didn't lose football games last year. Oklahoma State. They got blown out by UCF last year. They lost to South Alabama. And then the next week they would turn around and beat Oklahoma. So they were one of those teams last year. They're always one of those teams. Mike Gundy has built consistency at Oklahoma State. But playing the championships of the FCS is no easy task. South Dakota State is a very difficult team that's looking to go out and beat a Power 5 ranked top 25 opponent for the first time, I believe, since the North Dakota State Bison went ahead and beat Iowa a couple years back. That was absolutely shocking, and it could happen once again. There aren't a ton of upsets to go over just because there's FCS versus FBS matchups in week 1, and normally those are complete blowouts. When you get the powerhouses, that's when you get to talking. But the next one is an FBS versus FBS battle and two Power 5 opponents. We don't see a lot of that. Right now, Penn State is favored 9.5 points on FanDuel over West Virginia. I would take Penn State in this game, and I'd take the money. But West Virginia is an intriguing story. They're a top 25 level football team that had a 9-3, 8-4 season last year, a couple upset losses along the way, but they ended up winning the Duke's Mayo Bowl over North Carolina. And this year, they're looking to improve on that. Maybe sneak in with that auto bid. A lot of West Virginia fans will tell you they have a team that could go out and beat a team like Penn State. The reason Penn State's on the upset list is because they can kind of fall under pressure sometimes, under the lights, squander in big games, I'd say. Although this isn't really what they consider a quote-unquote big game at Penn State. Penn State beats the teams they need to beat. So there shouldn't be a worry about West Virginia too much, but they're on the upset list because certainly there's a little bit of an upset factor there. Definitely a team that could be sneaky. Next one is another one I'm just going to take straight up. This is going to be our last one on the upset list, but I would straight up take never mind, this isn't even an upset. Texas A&M right now is favored versus Notre Dame. That surprises me. This is the number 7 matchup versus the number 20 Texas A&M. It's at Texas A&M right now, so this line tells me that at a neutral site field, this would be about even money, because at home of the 12th man, we have favored in money for Texas A&M. I'm going to check FanDuel and see if it's the same there, but I would take the money right there, because Texas A&M has what they built, what this coaching staff is going to do with this new team is going to be unbelievable, and they'll be able to defeat a team like Notre Dame in the first week of the season. The doubts are not there in my mind. We're going to go over some NFL preseason games. Not going to hit on every single one like we did last week, but looking at some key performances for sure. Bo Nix, 12th overall pick, quarterback for the Denver Broncos, goes 8 for 9, 80 yards and a touchdown. The performance he needed to confirm to his team that he might be the guy. He's had some bad looks. Some people have been hating ever since the Auburn days, ever since the Oregon days. He's an older guy. He played a lot of years in college football, but now he goes out. He's 8 for 9 today, and he has a really solid game. He shows what he can do through the air as the Broncos win 27-2 today. Receivers, what we needed to see, we didn't see any performances from Troy Franklin today, which was disappointing. I would have liked to see him get a target or two, because he's a guy that I think could really make an impact this year. But Cortland Sutton does grab a catch. Other than that, they don't have a ton of receiving weapons this year. Tim Patrick does go out, and he grabs 4 catches for 30 yards. So that was intriguing to see. Now, from a Packers standpoint, without Jordan Love, they don't have a guy that can do a lot quarterback-wise. Michael Pratt was pretty decent, but other than that, let's hope that he doesn't get injured this season. Let's look at the player performances from this 23-24 loss by the Kansas City Chiefs to the Detroit Lions. Patrick Mahomes had 8 for 14, 93 yards, but the thing I like to see the most was he finally completed a behind-the-back pass in a preseason game. It's only time. We need to see it in a regular season game now. He delivered it accurately, so that's something else that they got to watch out for defensively now, because he can run one direction and totally throw you off, throw a behind-the-back pass in another direction. First time ever completed in an NFL game. It was fun to see for sure. Now, rushing-wise, Deneric Prince came out today, and he had 7 carries for 47 yards, 6.7 on the ground. He's a guy that really impressed in training camp last year. A lot of people thought there was a lot of roster talk that he might make the cut until the very end of camp, and then he just didn't make it. Now, Chris Oladukin, from a backup standpoint, looked pretty solid today. If Patrick Mahomes were to go down, I do believe Carson Wentz would be the backup. But 6 for
6 for 7 for 99 yards and a touchdown is nothing to be ashamed about. That's certainly a performance today. The Chiefs were trying a lot. It wasn't anything crazy today. Carson Steele didn't have the crazy game he had last week. He had 3 carries for 8 yards. But we're all seeing how it works out right now. This isn't a real playbook. This is more of just practice stuff. Let's talk about the defense. Now, Xavier Worthy, 3 receptions, 62 yards. What a performance by him. He's the first round guy, and that's exactly what we needed to see. He made a couple great catches. He also had 1 rush for 11, and he had a great run on a it was a Carson Wentz touchdown on a post route. It was a good route, good catch. Everything about it was perfect. He beat his DB over top, and it was great. Cornell Powell had a really long 64-yard touchdown also on the day. Rashee Rice had 4 receptions for 35 yards, and Justin Watson with a long reception for 20. But there was a lot of good receiving action today, and we want to keep that up. The Chiefs were struggled from the drops, especially last year, and there was a lot of receiving problems. But if they could continue what we saw then they should have no problem being in any sort of game. They should have no receiving problems this season. Now, moving on to Indianapolis versus the Cardinals, I want to talk about one guy and one guy only, Jason Bean. He's been my quarter. I mean, he was the Kansas quarterback last season. I watched a lot of him. He beat Oklahoma, and now look what he's doing. He comes into the preseason. He goes 7 for 9, 94 yards. He does throw an interception, but some of the things he did on the ground, I mean, he ran it in for a touchdown. He had 4 yards for 14 on the ground and a touchdown. So, a all-around great performance from him, from a guy that can really play football. And if he doesn't make the roster as a backup, hey, he was drafted first overall in the UFL for the Memphis Showboats, so he'll have definitely a roster spot open for Memphis and will probably be the starting quarterback for them. Now, it's still a possibility that the Colts decide to move him to wide receiver because he has blazing fast speed. But with some of the things they're seeing from him as a backup right now, it might be hard to betray that and to move him to a full-time backup. The Vikings sadly had to deal with the news that J.J. McCarthy is out for the season after suffering an injury from last preseason game. Their starting quarterback will be Sam Darnold in this upcoming year. Now, what that means for them is they're not going to be a good football team because that guy sees ghosts and doesn't know where he's throwing the ball. But today, instead of any of those guys, we had Nick Mullins and Jaron Hall throwing the ball, who aren't incredible. But Jaron Hall, hey, 4 for 5, 87, and 2 touchdowns is nothing to scoff about. And Nick Mullins, he had a pretty good game through the air. 135 yards and a touchdown. The completion percentage wasn't anything great, but Deshaun Jones catching 1 reception for 71 yards, that looks pretty good. He had a long touchdown there. I need to watch the highlight on that later because I did end up missing this game, unfortunately. But that looked to be a pretty good game, and I'll watch the highlights for that one later. There was a lot of one-score games in this preseason. It's very common. They're low scoring. It's a bunch of backups trying to make the team. It's barely football. I'm barely watching football. This is fake football. It's going to be fake football for another 2 weeks. Even the first week of college football is fake football because it's just a bunch of terrible teams playing all the really good teams so they can get their easy peasy wins out of the way. That doesn't really exist in NFL, but when it's a bunch of backups playing, there isn't much you can watch here. So we're trying to break down as much as we possibly can with these NFL matchups. The Commanders and the Dolphins. I want to look at the performance from Jaden Daniels. 10 for 12. Exactly what you want. You get your rookie quarterback drafted 2nd overall in the draft, and he goes out, he throws 10 for 12 for 78 yards. It's exactly what you want to see. He rushes for two carries and 13 yards. Enough said. Doesn't matter that they only scored 6 points. You get your guy doing that, and you know what you have. They've been seeing it all offseason. With the faulty playbook, you see that, and that's exactly what you like. especially against the Dolphins' first team defense. Also, the Chicago Bears. Look at Caleb Williams. I mean, he didn't have crazy numbers completion percentage wise, but if you watch what I watched, oh my. The way he was able to make incompletions look marvelous, the only person I've ever seen do that is named Patrick Mahomes until this guy Caleb Williams started doing it today. Now, the incompletions were great. The regular completions were great. He avoided like 18 sacks. He moved around. He jumped around. He was elusive, and that's exactly what you want to see. He's proven all those idiots that said, "Oh, Caleb Williams is going to be a bust in the National Football League." He's proven every single one of them wrong. That guy is nowhere near a bust and will not be a bust.